Hello and welcome to Closers Club. This is the podcast where sales leaders, agents, top performing agents, we all gather around to talk about the secrets to our success. Each podcast dives deep into the mindset, strategies, and the tools that can help you drive more performance out of your outbound sales. From building a winning culture to mentoring the next generation of sales leaders to even talking about the trends and technologies, we are here to provide you with background, perspective, and tips that can help you close more deals and make bank. So it's a new year. We have 2025, a whole road of 2025 ahead of us to really drive some deals. And that starts with creating the right kind of culture and sales team that can help you do that. Before we jump into today's topic, let's do a quick round of introductions, and then I'll kick it off as being the hostess with the mostest. So Mike, if you want to go ahead and kick things off, and then we can jump in.
Thanks, Paul. So I get a pretty interesting perspective. I deal with two companies in the space. I'm the vice president of TrueAlliant, which is a BPO in the Philippines. We work with a huge range of clients. We're a fairly large center. And then secondly, I own a media company where these two companies work hand in hand, driving paid search to our landing pages and generating with us focus of very, very high quality leads. So different perspective than a lot of the industry seeing having those two companies.
But yeah, my name's Dan Steinman. I'm the manager of customer success for Convoso. I have an interesting perspective because I work day to day with a variety of different sales forces and call centers.
I'm not a salesperson per se, but I'm really passionate about building products that actually make people earn a lot of money, which is the business we're in, right? We are helping outbound lead gen entrepreneurs build contact centers, be successful with our tooling there. And 20 years back, I was well before I joined the space here. These were relatively simple operations. They get more and more sophisticated. There's more and more things going on there. So really intrigued. My day in, day out is just trying to get deeper into understanding what do successful people do in this space. What are the tools that they need? How can we build a product solution that really deliver value here? So that's going to be my perspective in this.
Gentlemen, thank you for joining. And for those watching, I'm Paul Kalman. I'm Senior Director of Demand Generation here at Convoso. And again, I'll be the host for today and just really trying to moderate the discussion to just make sure that we get the most out of our time here. So Mike, I want to kick it off with you. So before we jump into the first question, 2024 just wrapped up, December just wrapped up. It's almost a two-part question. One, how was 2024 for you? And then this kind of dovetails into the main question that I want to kick things off with is it's a new year, right? 2025. How do you reset and refocus your team so you ensure a very strong start to the year?
2024 was a really interesting year because I believe it was around the November before last when ChatGPT came out and really started getting momentum. So owning a BPO, the start of 2024 was like, oh my God, AI is going to kill everybody and it's the end of the industry and things like that. So being that was the start of the year, it didn't get the momentum people had thought and overall turned out great. The one-to-one rules were passed early in the year, so there was a lot of future thinking and development and planning on what that's going to look like for us. So that led to a lot of innovation. As Daniel said, and I think it's important to note, Daniel's leading the innovation of products that sales teams utilize, and then me being on the tech side and using your tools that you're building, which then the sales teams are implementing to have success. So I think it's a really great perspective we're going to have here. Going into the new year, for me, I'm so heavily focused in insurance that this is the end of the year hasn't ended. It hasn't ended yet. January 15th is the deadline date for insurance. So I have a week where our teams are full force and ready to go. It's really the recovery after January where we kind of got to reset, align goals, and then prepare for one-to-one, which is, 19 days away.
Let's jump to that. So how, that's under a month. How are you guys making adjustments to that? Are you doing it now, or are you going to wait until after the insurance season ends? And then, Daniel obviously jump in. Let's have a discussion on one-to-one consent. I've also seen some of the kind of topics that have come out of lead gen world, with Trutman and, any of the discussions that he was having on stage. So really just want to get your opinion on this and, how you're making adjustments.
It is wild. Lead gen world. I took a couple laps and spoke to some of these booths, and I couldn't believe when I spoke to some lead vendors and they said, oh, we're aggregators. We buy from a lot of people and we do a lot of reporting to make sure the lead's good. And you're, as an aggregator, what's your plan for one-to-one? We are 20 days away, and people with booths at Lead Gen World told me, we're not really sure yet. We're going to just kind of figure it out. It's like, okay.
That is so lead gen.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this is going to be probably the biggest natural filter I've seen to this industry. I talk to people who are more tenure than me in this industry and talk about when TCPA first came about and you needed to put the opt-in language on a form. I'm like, oh my God, how are consumers ever going to fill out a form with all this language underneath it? And sure enough, they do. Right. But this one-to-one stuff is different because it's not just adding consent language to a form. There's a lot of like technical implementation to need to do this efficiently. So yeah, I mean, one-to-one I believe this is probably the largest natural filter that is going to weed out a lot of the bad actors or people just not prepared or people who think, I'm going to spin up a lead distribution software and just slang leads everywhere. That's no more.
So double clicking on the bad actors, is it really bad actors or is it just incompetence? It's like, yeah, I don't really know what I'm doing here.
Definitely both. I mean, I think that telco side is killing the bad actors because like you can't get traffic out when you're dialing dirty, crappy data excessively. But one-to-one, I think, is a little bit of both, right? The probably bad actors tend to not be so sophisticated, but also you need a level of sophistication to adapt to one-to-one, which should only help. It's just a matter of the lead volume stuff. I think it's a bit of both.
Dan, what do you see?
Yeah, I'm actually really excited for the changes with one-to-one consent. From my perspective, running an entire, customer success team, I'm really excited to see how it really helps just the general performance for all of our clients. Higher quality leads, like we're talking about, should just basically raise the average quality of the experience for everybody, improving general, I'd say, efficiency across the board, and just all the stuff you don't see behind the scenes with bad leads and concerns with compliance. Just that going away will just make life easier for everyone.
Well, I guess the question is like, will it go away? Like with the new administration coming in, do you think that this is just going to get completely killed, or do you think that it's going to be implemented?
I think that's a good question, actually, just because we've seen compliance change in the past and the landscape is always evolving. So there will be shifts where there'll be holes in the compliance expectations and wiggle room, other further changes in the law. This isn't just going to be the end all be all. So it should be exciting to see what comes.
Do you guys want to put any money on it? Like that? Like, will it actually come to fruition, or like, what are the Vegas odds on it happening versus not happening?
Wait, the January 26th change? Yeah, that's I put 99% on that.
99%.
Yeah.
That's like almost 100%.
This would be a big head for me because the amount of money we've had to invest into all the infrastructure for one-to-one is like, let's just go already. I'm ready. It's the poor guy at the booth who's trying to figure it out still. We'll scoop up all that volume and grow. So,
but let's be fair. Like this is a deadline, is a rule change. Say it's January 28th, 2 days after. What exactly has changed at this point? Not much. It's just you're doing things that are not completely against the rules anymore. But to actually have that trickle down the industry, you need to have a whole bunch of lawsuits. People need to start feeling the pain before change is actually happening, right? And that, as far as I understood, I know, Mike, Dan, if you have a different, or probably have a different view, but that's going to take time to work through the system. And to Paul's question, though, I do think that with the Doge, with a new administration that is just not very keen on over-regulating, with the Chevron doctrine, which I think is probably more sustainable, more fundamental shift that we should see change come through. These things just take a while. These things, they're not instantly implemented there, right? So I think in the long term, I think this administration is probably a good thing for the industry. Is the one-to-one consent rule going effect January 26th going to be canceled? No, I don't think so.
I don't understand how it can. We're 19 days away. It would be so weird if, like, a lot of people at the conference and prominent people who know a heck of a lot more about the law than I do are, saying double-digit percentage chances of this being thrown out. It's just, I can't imagine literally weeks before the buildup of this law that was passed, going on a year now, just like, okay, we're pushing it back and thrown out. It would feel, I don't know,
Wait, are they saying, smart people saying that there's a double-digit percentage?
Sure, I believe
that's not because the new administration then something else has been boiling up, right?
Yeah, well, IMC, Insurance Marketing Coalition, has done a good job and did a verbal argument with the FCC just a few weeks ago. And that kind of initiated the perception change. I think about a week ago, or maybe 2 weeks ago, Troutman with TCPA World had sent out an announcement. I think, don't quote me on this, but he says a 33% chance of this thing just not happening. And this was immediately after IMC. So, I give him a lot of credit. He's got a pretty good track record. So that holds weight with me.
All right. So we have an industry that is very active. I'm going to wait to see what's happened. There's that happening. There's a new administration that now, if you put all these things together, that's a pretty good, a few forces that are likely indicating this is not an industry that's about to die overnight. Right, that's the way I look at it, at least. Is there, in the spirit of what they're trying to achieve, is there good developments happening? I do think so. I think, to Dan's point, dealing with leads that are being shared with I don't know how many different contact centers that are of people that were ready to buy something 6 months ago. That's not something that we are excited about either, right? Like, sure, there's sales to be had there. There's actual customer interest sometimes to buy them, but I would rather see shift happening to people that are really ready to buy, have been prepared, have been reading up, have been, have high intent, to use the correct word here, and have people react to that, and that based on correct consent. That is tracked. I think that's generally speaking, especially for the more sophisticated business, which is what Convoso prefers to work with in the end, right? It's the right thing. And I do think there's a positive change here. But yeah, I do think it's never a dull day in this world, right? Everybody was 100% set, and who knows, maybe it may go in a different direction.
Well, I feel like from client success and Dan's perspective, like, your job completely changes if people comply. That's the big question, right, Daniel? Whether people are going to actually implement one-to-one on the 27th, that's on them to do or not. A lot of them might just do nothing and wait till the lawsuits come in, and the statute for TCPA is 4 years. That could be a really long time. On the flip side, people do comply. The problems that Dan, you probably explained 700,000 times a week is like, oh, you need more data. Your data quality is not very good. You've dialed these leads a bunch of times. They're not picking up. A lot of that goes away when a lead's not shared excessively, God knows how many times. And these people are gonna be like, oh my God, my dashboard's like green. Everyone's talking. My average call durations are longer. There's, my retention's better because my people aren't beat up on bad leads. So I think it's in your world, Dan, it's going to be a great thing for your client base that you're dealing with.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm very much looking forward to it for that reason. I know there's a lot of, trepidation towards change, but it's all positive from a customer success experience. Calling people that want to be called. Over-dialing is still a difference compliance kind of concern. It's not about the consent, but at least when you're calling people that want to be called, that's the whole reason we have these laws. We're trying not to be over-invasive to people's privacy. If you have an interest, that's great. That's what our technology is there for. But, I'd rather make 1,000 calls and 50 sales than 100,000 calls to make 80 sales. It's just not profitable. It's bad ROI.
Mm-hmm. Those 100,000 people that you call also agree with that logic.
Then you maybe a year ago, you visualized the reality though for a lot of our customers, which involved two animals, a snake and a pig. Can you explain that metaphor again? Because I found it very, very visual.
Yeah, that concept is calls made, like how many calls you're making to the call count. So one-to-one will hopefully make that, it's going to impact that to a degree. Lead quality and quantity is really what how are you going to get these high intent leads? You're going to have to spend more for them. You're going to have probably less leads realistically. So making sure that, what Daniel's speaking to, the snake metaphor, is if you add, let's say, 100,000 leads to a system that only has 25,000 leads on it, that one call count is going to slowly build up. And then you're going to see a degradation in performance because eventually you're going to have the bulk of your leads, at a call count of, let's say, 15 or 20. So it seems all good at the beginning for the first week. So it will be important to continue to monitor your lead quantity and the ratio of how many you're adding to the calls you're making daily. Because if you're not adding enough to the calls you're making, you are going to see diminishing returns. And that is one-to-one consent's going to, affect the availability of leads that people have.
Mm-hmm. Snake metaphor is great. I don't think I've tried to express that concept a lot of times and not that effectively, but you like see the wall of leads on that dial by list disposition report, and it's a wall, literally. You see it. That's a very good metaphor. We look at lead to agent ratio. I mean, that's simplified response, right? How many leads are you buying per dialing person per day to feed your system?
That's what you need. Yeah, that's the math. And then what happens is you'll have a complete shutdown if that bulk hits the last call count. So you'll run out of dialable leads and end up in a day where you're just not putting out any calls. And that's the quick thing to, you can quickly see that. And then adding leads is really the only solution unless you extend the call count.
So Mike, quick question on that. I know we're talking about leads and prioritization. Like, are you doing anything different this year? Coming into the year, are you doing anything different to prioritize leads to essentially help, to make sure that your reps aren't wasting any time or hitting dead ends? Like, what are you doing differently for the start of the year?
Well, I mean, I think we're really just capitalizing on what we've identified that we did well this past year. And to elaborate on that, at Keystone, for example, when we started the company, it's quite difficult to start a lead company. It's, kind of the same logic of like, if you're to start a social media platform, how do you get the very first people on the platform? Because there's no use to them. There's nobody else using it, right? To start a lead company, you need a pretty sizable footprint of buyer availability to make sure you're placing leads and monetizing properly and things like that. So when we started the company, we sold leads on a semi-exclusive basis. We sold them twice, which was very unique to the industry because our leads are definitely the highest quality, but also the most expensive leads. And that was a really, really hard concept for people to adapt to because when leads cost 5-10 times as much as industry standard, yes, conversion rates are higher, CPA is what we're looking at, but it's a hard thing for people to comply to. As we grew and built a client base, we started selling leads on a shared model where they'd be shared more times, up to 6 times, because the clients demanded cheaper leads. And right before the end of the year, we just completely discontinued it. So, talking about efficiency, we are capitalizing on what we've always done well as a company, which is extremely high intent, extremely high quality lead that is shared less, and focusing on that because not only does it comply with one-to-one much easier by getting multiple opt-ins, which we're doing, but that is the shift that I think the industry is going to go into, is get rid of this like brute force, just hammering data. I mean, the ratio Dan used, 100,000 calls to make 50 sales, and that's crazy. So focusing on high quality, which then leads to efficiency, is what our big focus is this year.
And then what are your big bets for the year? Like, have you started kind of strategizing on where your big bets, or what are your innovations that you're planning for? And are you able to share some of that?
Sure, I'll share a piece, and I know you guys have some good stuff coming too. When people think about one-to-one, as I mentioned, this is unique to when a TCPA first came out, where you just got to add a disclaimer. Like, you don't even really need to code, and you can dig through some HTML and find where to input a little snippet to put a disclaimer under a submit button. That wasn't all that hard when TCPA started. So now, to dynamically display companies before the opt-in occurs, it's a little bit more tricky. You need to know like state criteria. You need to gather some data to see who's eligible. You need to predict a price. You need to know how much budget these people have. A lot of things you need to assume before the opt-in occurs, and then make a prediction on who to display. That is like the very first step of one-to-one, and that's what people need to comply with, and that's why some of these people are falling behind. But there's so many more problems after that. Like and people are not anticipating these things. Very simple example of this. If your company's name is, get this money health insurance, A lot of people probably are not going to select your name on an opt-in. They're probably going to select the guy next to you that's US Health Advisors, a much stronger name. So then you need to quantify that and understand, well, if this guy's name sucks and I'm displaying him on my form, it costs me money to get that name in front of somebody. And now I need to quantify what that's going to cost for me to display and the likelihood for them to get an opt-in. That's the first obvious step. I mean, it goes on and on and on.
So it's one of the, if I try to paraphrase you here, so one of the factors that you will need to weigh in order to get that lead, you're going to be seeing who's available, who wants to take it, etc., and therefore display name. But the reputation, the brand of the company is now becoming one of the criteria. That's knowing what I know about the space. That was never a concern, right?
And that's what people like. Complying with one-to-one is just a technical portion. That's the next step that no one even seems to be, even the ones that are somewhat equipped for one-to-one, I haven't really heard, prepared for that. And, we developed algorithms, which we refer to effective bidding, which does quantify these, how valuable your brand is. And then, the statistical likelihood of you actually getting that opt-in.
So Mike, are you guys investing in brand? Are you going to start building out more of a brand presence for, your media agency as well as the BPO side of things?
Our focus and why we're partnering with you guys, one of our core values at Keystone is client-centric approach. And, there's no reason a lead company should be, partnered with a dialer company at the level we are and how intricate we work together. But because of our core value, we want to give as much guidance to our clients as possible to make sure they're successful. I can generate 100,000 leads, but if all of my clients go out of business, I can't tell my leads. I need my clients to be successful. I need to have good technology. This is why we're partnered with you guys. This is why I know Dan from Client Success. I don't even personally pay Convoso, I don't think, but I work with the client success team at quite great depth because we want to make sure our client base is successful. A step further now becomes the brand. When I'm displaying a horrible company name, I need to tell my clients, hey, your name sucks. You need to change it. You need to build a website. You need to develop a brand. Otherwise, you're going to be paying for a fortune for leads. And if your conversion rate sucks on my forums and it's costing $70 to win a lead because your conversion rate is so small, I can't increase my closing percentage on my leads. Your CPAs are going to be $1,200. You're going to go out of business. So rather than us developing our brand, which we do, and we focus on these things, we're kind of giving that guidance to our client base as well on developing strong brands.
This is gold. I mean, for the people listening, this is real important insight, I think, because it just makes complete sense, right? If you're a lead, who are you going to click up? A known brand or some kind of weird, nobody really thought about how we name this company kind of that brand name, right? So
I would actually echo that too. And it's not just creating a website, right? Like there are so many companies. So I'm from the demand side, right? Where I'm trying to reach the Mikes of the world as well as your customers, right? We go through and say, okay, this website, what do they look like on LinkedIn? What do they look like on Facebook, on X, platform XYZ? When you can't find the company on LinkedIn, it's just like, is this a legitimate company? Like how many people are actually working here? Do they have a US presence at all? Right. And so from the end consumer's perspective, you really have to think through like how are you present online? And do I trust you, especially if it's something within insurance? Do I trust you to actually trust you with my life, essentially, right? And so that reputation definitely matters.
You nailed it. I mean, another thing, it's so funny. There's something called TSR rules, and a lot of our client base probably doesn't know what TSR rules are. These are telemarketing sales rules. These are the rules you follow as a telemarketer. One of those things being saying your name at the beginning of the call, your company name, agent name, in the first 30 seconds. When one-to-one comes, you can't hide behind DBAs. They know who they're opting into, and they're expecting to hear that company name. And these are rules you have to follow as a telemarketer. And it's a big natural filter. This is the biggest change I believe to ever happen to the industry. And the strong will adapt and grow because regulation is opportunity for those who comply. And the ones who fall behind, unfortunately, probably will not.
question, typically when this is a disruptive filter, you say, right? Like, what does it mean for the smaller, less sophisticated business? Is it just keep on struggling until you die, or should you really start thinking about consolidation strategies and start joining forces with some of your competitors now, or other folks in the industry, or is it just no, we cannot really expect those smaller companies to survive here? How do you look at that?
That's a really good question. So, along the way,
Do you have M&A budget available? Are you buying people?
well, I say regulation is opportunity, right? And I can think of two instances similar to this. One's not an example of regulations, but one is an example of having to adapt to times, which is COVID, obviously. When COVID hit, I was in the Philippines, and I remember taking a picture of the guy on the flight attendant on the way there in February. He's wearing a mask. I thought that was really weird. March comes, the whole world shuts down. I get stuck in the Philippines. At that time, I believe I had about 120, 140 seats. Relative to now being, a couple thousand seats, I was a small company. And for BPO standards, 100, 120 is not so big. And we did a really good job at navigating COVID. We housed employees. We did a lot. There's a whole nother, I think, podcast.
Wait, how long were you stuck in the Philippines?
9 months. They shut down the airports. I was literally stranded in the Philippines for 9 months. I tried to leave. They wouldn't let me leave. I needed all this paperwork. Again, this is a whole nother discussion. But yeah, not 9 months.
I remember what that happened to you, Mike. And I got to also say, because you mentioned you're client-centric, you are also very agent-centric. I know we haven't really got to that portion yet, discussing how we handle our teams. But I mean, talk about building a strong sales team. I mean, your team looks up to you. I know from our relationship, you've invited members of my team to go hang out with you.
Oh, yeah.
So it was a crazy time for you guys, for sure.
So that's funny. Mike, I have not actually gotten that invite. So
you're all welcome. It'll be a great time. We'll stop, Daniel, wherever you're from. We'll stop there on the way. Philippines is so far. You're probably the halfway point, wherever that might be. Make a whole trip out of it. Love to have you guys. But yeah, we've had some of your team out, and the core and the purpose of these discussions, which Paul had reiterated a couple times in the intro, is the importance of building a strong culture. And I mean, at our size, if you have a cancerous culture, you just crumble from the inside. So yeah, crucial.
So let's pivot. Let's pivot and talk about culture for a minute. What are you seeing that works, right, in building a sales culture? And it doesn't necessarily mean you, meaning Mike, but across the team. Like, all of us work as team leaders. We work as a part of a team. What do you think? What are you seeing that actually works in developing your team?
So, for me to talk about these things, there's other people that are going to give things a lot more profound. So right after me, I'm going to pass it to Dan, because I think he will. But I have a very, very strong team around me. I am an engineer. I am good at building systems. But what I believe and stand by, and why I believe I'm able to build strong relationships with my people, is because I genuinely want to understand who they are as a person. I want to know about them and their life, and build a bond and make a difference in people's lives. And for me to build this big company, it's really cool. It's really great. It's a great accomplishment. It's awesome. But I want to know that I'm making an impact on people's lives. And I know I have bosses, in my last jobs, and I remember some of them for great things, and I remember some of them for bad things. And I want to make sure I'm remembered for good things. So as long as my intentions are good, and I'm truly trying to understand who my people are, and what motivates them, and what they care about, that's how I believe I make a good impact, and then therefore, gain loyalty, and they're going to work hard for me when they know I truly care about their best interests.
Yeah, I mean, culture is everything to the success of a team. Though I try to be very standard open door policy, always ensure they are aware of all the resources and tools they have available. You really want to make sure you're monopolizing on everything that you can, providing support where needed, making sure there's standard process flow, but really building that rapport, kind of like Mike was saying. It's not just a business. It's, talking about other things, always being available, showing that you really care about what we're doing here, consistent check-ins, stuff like that. But I really do think culture is the backbone to success in any business.
Same. Not so much the sales culture, more on the product side, obviously, right? But generally speaking, being people-centric as Dan pointed out, you are, Mike, but your team is crucial. You gotta know the individuals. What I've learned is that pretty much all problems in business are almost exclusively confusion problems. People being confused, not having clarity, not having the same understanding of what we mean with A, B, or C. So that's where I spend most of my time on, is just trying to make sure that we are not causing confusion. We are driving towards a clear outcome here. So on the sales side, it's funny. I've never had led a sales team. I've only worked in sales in many moons ago. But I was found for the people that I reported to is that they were really hard on focusing on the outcomes of the business, the numbers, the money you're gonna make, and not enough about what the bigger picture was. Like, what is the context that we do this in? And that, again, for me, maybe that's why I end up in product. For me, it's all about who exactly is the person that we are talking to on the phone. What's their life look like? What are we trying to achieve? What are we trying to, the impact we're trying to have there? That I feel would benefit everyone in any kind of role in any business, but especially in sales. Not at all costs trying to close the sales, but first let's try to think out who are you actually talking with, and trying to get on the same page with the person.
I would add to that is, and this kind of dovetails into a question that I want to ask the team here, is, with the adoption of AI tools, right? I kind of feel that for inspiring sales teams or any team, there has to be an aspect of creativity. Like, you have to allow people just to think creative, right? Because otherwise you're just going to get the same general response from a ChatGPT, right? And I think that what ChatGPT and all these other language models are doing is, as a person perspective, if you can just think for a second of creativity, think outside the box to get a result, you can work with these AI models to actually do a large portion of the execution. That's writing emails, writing ad copy, designing ads, whatever it is. That's like, this is the heavy lifting part of it. So I kind of feel that, like, in addition to what you guys are saying, is for teams to really flourish, especially over the next year and beyond, is like, we need to allow people to actually be the creative hub to a hub and spoke model with AI, right? And that said, my question that I want to talk about is, Mike, you said earlier, ChatGPT really didn't take off the way that everyone thought it was going to take off in 2024. What are the general thoughts of where AI is headed for 2025? Where is it going to actually lead in sales versus just sales being used or being used by sales?
And to be clear, I mean, obviously ChatGPT is like probably my favorite piece of technology ever developed, and I use it constantly.
Like 100 million users within the first week or something?
Were they in like a week or something?
Yeah. Absurd.
And it is extremely powerful. And when I mean it didn't take off as expected, I mean it didn't kill the BPO industry overnight and stuff like that. But just as with regulations, you need to comply and adapt before you fall behind. It's the same with technology. If you're not leveraging these tools, eventually you're going to fall behind. And I think Nokia's CEO there's a good article, I don't know if they filed, at what point it was released, when they filed bankruptcy or something like that, but they said, we didn't do anything wrong. We didn't make any bad decisions. We just didn't adapt to the industry. And, iPhone started coming out. When's the last time you guys had a Nokia phone? A long time ago. Very same thing here, where if you're not leveraging this technology, it is definitely here to stay, and it's only going to get better, and you're going to fall behind if you're not using it.
I mean, so I was listening to the All In podcast probably like 5 months ago, and I forget who mentioned it, but they were saying, we take a ChatGPT or AI approach to every first instance that we have in our business. So before you reach out to a coworker, before you ask a question, before you even Google anything, put it through ChatGPT, right? Like, and I think that they were running numerous credits and whatever, and all their credits within the company like ate up within the first day. And the founder, I forget who it was that said this, but he's like, that's great. You need to do more of this, right? Because the outcomes are so much better, right? Like, you're going to be able to actually be able to talk with an AI agent, get more ideas, get more refined ideas, and a better product actually emerges. So I can totally see this happening within sales, especially from the scripting side of things. Like, how are you able to actually design more scripts using AI to make it so that it meets your personality type as well as, the customers in which you're reaching out to.
Yeah, I was just thinking in the different phases of AI, like 2.0 or 3.0, to like Paul saying, it's really going to be the next level will be building rapport. Like it'll understand, Mike has a team out in the Philippines and he'll ask non just business related questions. So like a pseudo actual conversation, which creates, it sounds weird to say today, but a bond with an AI who's going to ask you how your weekend was and how your family's doing and really go beyond that. Certainly not there yet, but it will get there eventually.
We already have girlfriends. You can get a AI girlfriend, boyfriend these days.
Exactly. That for sales.
Technologists, I'm a bit more skeptical about how well we will be able to do these kind of things. I remember 10 years ago, I was talking about that use case, Dan, more for customer service, but hey, what if we could route a lead or a customer to an agent that cares about the same sports teams and give them the prompt so they can build more authentic human connection, right? I think it's a good idea. Very difficult to execute in practice here. Especially large language models in the end mimic human language based on learning data, right? And I think we're going to see a regression to the mean situation when it comes to its capacity to really be authentic, do something different, think a bit out of the box there. But also, I'm spending a lot of time more thinking about how AI can be used with effectively managing campaigns the last few weeks here. Effectively manage your contact center operations here. And I went to ChatGPT, Grok, Gemini, Claude, and Anthropic on whatever the fifth one, like 5 different ones. And I all asked the same question, that they could create a map of US area codes, and then I could paste in the number of DIDs that we use for each area code so I can create a visual heat map. Not a single one could even get something close there. So there are just what I would consider relatively simple tasks that you would expect a system to be able to do, not able to do here, right? And that is just, maybe that example is top of mind right now, the frustration of going to 5 different systems, all paying $20 a month. The subscriptions get there, and then literally getting nothing out of it there. Some advice on how I can generate it myself using Google Maps. There's still a long way to go to be truly meaningful beyond simply repeating other human beings. But maybe, to your point, that's what we need in sales. Maybe we need an AI that can be repeating the tried and true ways of selling using a certain scripts with some variations, and that's what we need here.
Yeah.
AI truly taking over everything, I think we're still a long ways out.
We did see a glimpse of it. There was the computer electronics show last week. I don't know if you guys followed that, if you're super into AI, but the Grace Blackwell chip is pretty much what you were talking about right there for anyone who's super keen on that stuff. Because it really is night and day, like going from DOS to Windows 95. It's just the next level of AI, which is basically what we've been discussing.
Who is the company for that?
I believe it's NVIDIA.
NVIDIA?
You're right. I pulled it up as you said that. You're correct, NVIDIA.
Yeah. And the reason is, not to get super off topic, but they're even competing with, Apple as the most valuable company in the entire world. So it just is telling on where AI is going.
The phone is still the bread and butter for Outbound, right? Knowing how more agents, more companies, they're mixing in SMS, email, social media, et cetera, how do we make it so the phone, or do we make it so the phone continues to stay that secret weapon for closing deals? Is that even necessary nowadays? Is it more important to have the ability to jump on like a Google Meet with a prospect to help close that deal? Like where does the phone actually play in, especially as consumers are using more devices, more channels to actually connect with people? So I'll leave that question open.
I think it's for us working in tech, it is really easy to assume that everybody sits in their office on their butt all day long. The reality is that most people do not work in their office all day. They're on the move here. So that would be a first constraint. Like it's very easy to assume that the general consumer is able to take calls on a computer or use social media here. So phone is just while you're working, while you're in the car, while you're walking, is still the most convenient way to actually talk there. And the second aspect of it, me personally, I prefer asynchronous texting or WhatsApp or whatever the mechanism is for when I need to solve a problem for service. I do think that if I have a need and I'm in the heat of buying, if I have intent, I would rather close the deal. I would rather have a conversation with a few qualified, informed salespeople that can kind of empathize with my situation and not offer me stupid stuff. Right. So I think data is important there, but I would rather do it over the phone. So I definitely think there's a future, for the foreseeable future, at least, for the phones, up to the point where we all get those implants, all the Neuralinks, and we all have our conversations, but thinking to other people.
I think what Dan had touched on it early on, but with one-to-one coming, people are going to be actually wanting to speak to the people calling. So I think phone, especially with like consumer initiated search lead gen, as you're saying, Daniel, intent is so much higher. So the people who are actually expecting a calls and have high intent, a phone is going to be adequate. I wouldn't buy insurance over a text message, but I'm definitely a heck of a lot easier to reach with a text message to most of my clients and stuff like that, because I'm often busy and tied up. So to squeeze all of the juice out of the lemon, I think you need to leverage everything. But as intent increases and this brute force type style of telemarketing starts to go away, I think phone will still be very effective.
Yeah, I agree. I think phone will always just be the, primary way to close a deal, because it's just fluid and it's that level of comfort. With technology developing, it depends on the industry, but sometimes a short form consent can be just very simple. Maybe for insurance, I totally agree with you. I wouldn't want to buy that through a text message, but maybe it's auto warranty. You just need to update your car. You go through a quick short form, AI kind of guides you through it. They give you a quote. It's a little simpler. You need less human interaction. At the end of the day, when you're going to want to talk to someone, most likely.
I'm waiting for the day that true multimodality actually works. When you can be in the phone, but also on your computer, on your iPad, see the product that whatever person is selling you over the phone in action. Or you can actually do a quick sign, signature, and all that kind of stuff. So the ability to have a conversation while also have a online interaction to a different device in a multimodal mode, that I think is going to be a game changer eventually. But again, something that they've been talking about for 10 years now.
That is a huge point to end with, because you're now the second person in the last month who I've heard talking about exactly this. So this is a great ending point, because I think, yes, people have been talking about it, but I think people are actually trying to do it now. And we're going to see that not so far future.
All right. So gentlemen, thank you for the time today. For you, those that are watching the pod, we hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. You can reach us at convoso.com. Fill out a form, we can respond, promptly. So thank you again, and have a great rest of the afternoon.
Thanks, hostess with the mostest. Cheers, guys.